Thank you to the sponsor for this video, Keen. Visit trykeen.com/Nadiya to get your first 10 minutes for only $1.99 with one of their trusted advisors. I too had a chance to try Keen when I was approached to have them as a sponsor. I loved my reading, and I only recommend services I trust. Visit trykeen.com/Nadiya to get your first 10 minutes for only $1.99. Hello, fabulous friends, fans, and superstars. Welcome to your horoscope for the week of April 10, 2022. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. It is a remarkable astrological week without a doubt. Big moves happening in the sky now, and it truly is a very special week. We are going to have a peak moment, not just of the month, not even just of the year, but truly of the decade. One of the most important celestial events that takes place this decade is the fact that Jupiter and Neptune will meet in the sky in the sign of Pisces. On Tuesday, these two planets are going to get together with precision. But this is really energy that we've been feeling coming for a while, and very likely we'll be feeling throughout this month as well. And in one way or another, especially once we navigate forward and we get to just before Halloween and Jupiter retrogrades back into the sign of Pisces, we'll feel it at that time again. And I do think it is this divine meeting of Neptune and Jupiter that is in many ways speaking to what is taking place for us now as a collective, but it can also speak to what could be coming up for us as well. There's always a collective expression, there's an outward expression, a literal expression, and then there's a personal expression of any celestial phenomenon that takes place. The more personal connection, I think the more spiritual expression of this energy is going to be an invitation towards divine love and what that means for us, and how is it that we are going to express that for ourselves. However, for the collective, there are some very key and clear events that are taking place now that hearken to what took place last time these two planets got together in the sign of Pisces in 1856. So Jupiter is the ancient ruling planet of Pisces. Neptune is the modern ruling planet of Pisces. And when these two planets get together, they do so quite rarely, depending on the larger cycle playing out. It could be anywhere from 12 years to 15, sometimes a little bit more. It can depend on a whole variety of factors, but we can say that depending on how fast one is going, how fast the other is going, yes, they do connect at least twice every 30 years or so. And when they connect, it is always a turning point, importantly so, for us as a collective. It was towards the end of the last decade, the decade before, the zeros, the 2000 zeros, that these two planets met in the sign of Aquarius. And when they did, that was in some ways this proliferation of social media. And I do think that Neptune and Aquarius, really the big statement, right? The big social change that happened with Neptune and Aquarius was that we had the way in which we connected to each other. It was like these borders dissolved. And that's part of what Neptune represents, this disillusionment. And there are different ways to understand that, right? Disillusionment can be dissolving, the dissolving of limitations, the dissolving of borders that allows the online space to even happen, that allows social media to even happen. They used to say that we're 6 degrees of separation from just about anybody on the planet, from each other on the planet. What that means is between name whatever person, famous, not famous, whatever, and you, there are literally like 6 people in the middle that get you to that person. 6 degrees of separation. But now it's not even that. It's direct. It's very direct. where we're able to go on to somebody's social media, no matter who they are, no matter where they are, no matter how you judge their status or their influence, and you can comment on their posts, and chances are, at some point, they just might comment back. And that becomes an interaction. That is those degrees of separation just dissolving as a result. And so it was Neptune moving through Aquarius that allowed those degrees of separation from each other to dissolve. And Aquarius, of course, is also an energy of technology and new technologies as well, along with the collective and connecting to each other. And then Jupiter comes, meets Neptune, and sort of accelerates that, helps Neptune to be that much more prolific, to proliferate that much more. And so now this is taking place in the sign of Pisces, and there are a couple of things to be mindful of here. It was the discovery of Neptune that same century that was part of heralding these great movements of equality, this disillusionment of structures of inequality. So for example, the discovery of Neptune is very often associated with the abolitionist movement, which allowed slavery based on race to come to an end. It's also been associated very strongly with the suffragette movement, which is very strongly associated with the spiritualism movement in the US in particular. And that was also based on this idea of equality as well, this idea of dissolving these previous structural limitations. And there's an emphasis on the structural of it. And so we see here this important moment, right? And it's not just isolated to a particular time frame, a particular week, but there's this larger time frame of these planets being connected and how it is that they are able to then spread, with Jupiter's help magnifying the reach of Neptune, to really allow this sense of compassion, or to allow a sense of transition and change to take place. Very often rooted in, whether you want to call it spiritual energy, whether you want to call it divinity, whether you want to call it compassion. But rooted in compassion, so much can change. And so historically, let's consider in 1856, we had the first meeting of a brand new political party in the US called the Republican Party. And one of their more important assertions was abolishing slavery. And it was Abraham Lincoln who was aligned with that party. And so that was the beginning of a movement, of a process that lent itself to the big changes that came up with the abolition of slavery. And so consider what that could mean for us today, right? How is it that that very message, what new political parties could be formed as a result? For example, one interesting phenomenon that's been taking place more recently in Canada. For those of you who've watched me for a while, you know that I'm Canadian, not in Canada at the moment, but what's been very fascinating is that our more further left party called the NDP and our center, sometimes center left party called the Liberal Party that's currently in power, have formed a coalition, have formed an alliance. And a part of the assertion of the NDP party has been that the purpose of the alliance and the benefit of the alliance will be to expand healthcare to include dental care as well, and pharma care, as they're calling it, which is prescription drugs. And so it's so interesting that this connection to healthcare is happening, and how it is that more of us are considering and talking about, and the proliferation of healthcare is taking place. A couple of other examples that come to mind in particular. Right now, a lot of us are focusing on, or some of us are focusing on, The Theranos scandal, which was a company that was set to revolutionize healthcare, but it turned out to be a company that was built on a house of cards. If you want to learn more about Theranos, you can watch the show called The Dropout. It's very fascinating to see on so many different levels how it was that company was able to do all the things that it was able to do in terms of actually testing people and not having accurate results, but nobody really checking up on them and so on. It's all this very illusionary energy, right, that we see along with Piscean energy that sometimes can be there, that can be very fantastical. And so the person who headed up this company, Elizabeth Holmes, she was very fantastical. That was part of the energy as well. It's interesting, but the last time Jupiter was in Pisces, Jupiter conjuncted Uranus. And that was, almost to the day, it was so remarkable. These two planets conjuncted, and we had the passing in the US of the Affordable Care Act, which some people call Obamacare. And it was part of the protective influence of Jupiter that's allowed that particular act to continue to progress. I am hopeful for my fellow Canadians that the protective influence right now of Jupiter can help these advances that are being made to progress. Another interesting thing to take into consideration, in 1856 was the end of the First Crimean War. Now, if that sounds familiar, it should, because more recently, part of the expansion or the attempted expansion of Russia was going into other regions, like Russia did way back then, going into Crimea. More recently, in the last few years, Russia went into Crimea. And now, of course, more recently has gone into the Ukraine, which is something that's been getting a whole lot of attention, of course, around the world, and the refugee crisis that's created, and so much more. Now, what's very fascinating is that it was in 1856 that the First Crimean War came to an end. It was Russia that was defeated as a result of the international support of Crimea from other governments, other militaries like the Ottoman Empire, like France, and so on. And so it's very interesting to see how events right now are kind of mirroring some of the things that we have seen historically with these two planets getting together. And so as a collective, I think that this particular meeting of Jupiter and Neptune in Pisces, it can indicate, and it may happen right on the day, but chances are we're speaking more about a time frame. We're speaking more about the month of April in general, that we may see changes and progress being made on these different fronts that I just mentioned. Historical events are already taking place that are moving us in that direction of, in some way, having world events mirror what took place way back then in 1856, the last time these two planets connected in the sign of Pisces. But of course, it's me. I'm going to care a lot more, as much as I care about what happens in the world, and it's interesting to look at. I'm always very interested in what's happening with us internally on a level of, for me, I'm always very interested on what's happening on a level of our hearts, on a level of our spirit, and the things that more individuals are likely going to be learning and likely going to be feeling. And I was thinking about the energy of Pisces as so associated with a few different states. So divine love is one of them. Drunkenness is another, right? The energy of Neptune and Pisces, and of course Jupiter as ancient ruler of Pisces. These are placements that have been associated with spirits, also known as wine, also known as whatever gets you drunk, whatever helps you to escape. And as I was looking at the sky, I was reminded of Rumi, actually. So Rumi is a very famous poet. He's the most widely read poet in the world. And actually it is Rumi's poems that are the most sold books in the world. Second is the Bible, being the second most sold book in the world, or variations of it as well included in that. And so Rumi was a Sufi mystic, And he came from a pretty mystical, religious family in sort of the Middle East, Northern Africa. And it was when Rumi got older that he met Tisibi. And Tisibi ended up being a mentor to him and was a part of his life constantly for 4 years. And after that time, it's said that Tisibi sort of left the house. He said, I'm going out for a bit. He left and he didn't come back. And scholars have speculated that Tisibi was likely murdered. What's interesting is that Rumi is very well known for these poems about divine love, of associating the divine or God or whatever you call your higher power, associating that higher power and calling it the beloved, associating it with feelings of drunkenness, of longing, of loss, of desire. But what's not often known is that some of Rumi's most impressive works that evoke this sense of longing and intoxication as a correlation to desiring the love of the divine. A lot of these works were actually written as he was moving through the grief and the loss of his dear mentor. And so it's been speculated, are these poems really about the divine? Are they actually about his mentor? But scholars pretty much agree that it was through the mentor, but it was always about, and Rumi was conscious that it was always about the divine, or the beloved, as he called it. And so there's one poem in particular that I thought of for Rumi as I looked at the sky this week. And it literally uses words of like, I am intoxicated, I am in a fog, I am drunk, I've lost my sobriety in search of you. There's nothing else that exists other than being able to fill myself with you, to be intoxicated by you. It is only when I'm intoxicated by you that I know myself as my truest nature. Other than that, I'm completely lost. And so I'll link to that poem below because I'm paraphrasing here, but it really is quite beautiful the way in which he's able to express the desire of a longing. And you wonder as you read this, is this the grief and longing for his mentor, which very likely it is, or is it truly a longing for divine love? Is it the love that was embodied in his mentor, or is it the love of the divine? And even Rumi, we see him grapple with that very question in some of his writings, striving to try and understand for himself, is this really about my mentor, or is this about something greater? Is this about divine love, or is it that I just really miss my mentor and my teacher and my very dear friend? And so even he's grappling with these questions. And so I bring it up because as I looked at the sky this week, I felt like how many of us are going to be grappling with some of these questions for ourselves? How many of us are going to be dealing with or finally getting to the root of or addressing some deep sense of whether it was past disappointments, whether it was loss within ourselves as well, perhaps disappointment. Where is it now that we need to bring compassion to ourselves in our journey? But also, where is it now that many of us might be wanting to make a distinction of some kind? Wanting to have a clarity or a depth of understanding within ourselves as to what is it that we are really longing for? Is it that we're really longing for that person we're no longer with, that person that got away? Or is it that we were always going for, longing for, wanting something else, something higher, something greater, something deeper, something even more fulfilling? I was also thinking about, I mentioned this recently to a lovely person that I was able to sit down and talk with recently. I was talking about Scott M. Peck. You might have heard his name before if you've watched me for a while, because he's written a couple of books that are my all-time favorite books, both of which I've read many, many, many times over. The first one is called The Road Less Traveled by Scott M. Peck. It was a huge phenomenon years ago, decades ago, actually. And then the other lesser known book, but very impressive to me, is a book called Further Along the Road Less Traveled, also by Scott M. Peck. And in this book, he has a chapter on addiction. And he talks about how people who have to address addiction to substances as part of their path, ultimately, it is a desire to return and connect with Source. It's a desire to return to the state in which we were when we were as if we were in our mother's wombs. And so if you think about being in an enclosed space, completely safe, not having to think, completely operating on instinct, and allowing, not feeling like anything needs to be provided for. There's just a sense of absolute safety, knowing that you are in a universe and a world all of your own. It's a desire to return to that state of bliss, that sense of peace, and that sense of connection, right? That's often a piece that is, often not addressed as well in that blissful state, is how important connection is to that. And there are people who talk about how important it is when it is that you have addiction, for example, and you're addressing addiction, how important connection with other people is, human connection is with others. Having people you can really be honest with, that you can talk to, is such an important part of many types of programs of recovery. And there are so many different approaches out there, but whatever the approach may be, normally some type of understanding of human connection and human interaction is a part of that journey. Now, I would say that our connection to our animals is very powerful as well. It can be very healing for us as well. It can be part of what addresses that deeper, more fundamental need, as Scott M. Peck put it, for connection, for deep, profound connection, like we would have had if we were still not individuals, but part of another's body, like our mom in the womb. That intimate sense of bonding is what the soul craves and we long for and we want. There are many, many philosophers who've talked about how and why it is that we seek love, for example. And one of the ideas that comes up very frequently is this idea that when it is that we truly can be seen or acknowledged by another person, there's something very powerful that happens in that. It's like we're able to see ourselves. When we find acceptance with another person, it's like we're able to accept ourselves. And of course, this isn't about giving power to anybody else. Of course not. This is more about acknowledging the deeper human need we have. Not everybody that acknowledges us and sees us, or everybody that might love us or that we love, is meant to be somebody who's going to walk with us for the rest of our lives. There are certain types of connections that are for a time, and that's fine. There are certain types of connections that really, as much as there may be love there, we get to a point where we realize if we're really going to love ourselves and be there for ourselves, be a genuine companion to ourselves, to be able to acknowledge ourselves and what we feel, we may have to leave. And sometimes that can be just an inner prompt. Sometimes it can be very blunt, very obvious. In the case of connections and relationships that really aren't helpful, aren't healthy, maybe there's abuse involved, then we know, right, that wherever you are, whoever you are, you don't deserve that. But it can be hard to make that transition, especially when there's been so much hope, and perhaps there is still hope. It can take a journey and take a process to get to the place where we're able to acknowledge that the love we were seeking was always within us. This is actually something that Rumi speaks about extensively in many of his poetry as well, in many of his writings as well. He talks about going outside himself, seeking, longing, journeying, looking, only to realize that what he was looking for was within him all along. Seeking the beloved, but then realizing that he is the beloved. Looking for the universe and not even knowing the universe until he was willing to look within. He uses these types of terminologies and phrases to understand what love is, and that may very well be why it is that his poetry has resonated for so many centuries. Because all of us, regardless of whether we're in a spiritual tradition or religious tradition or not, in some way or another, we are wanting to know love. It is one of the most core defining principles. I wouldn't even say just of human beings, but of life. If there is life, there is love. And there's a desire to grow towards greater love. And that may be part of the journey now, but how conscious are we going to be of the journey? That's also part of the invitation at a time like this. How much are we able to look at and acknowledge where it is that we are on that journey towards that bliss that can only be found within? And where is it now that maybe some of us need to find a level of acceptance and forgiveness and compassion towards ourselves for all the times in which we looked for that love outside of ourselves? Being able to find that sense of knowing, like just the acknowledgement of it, like that time that I went out with that person and that person was all wrong for me and they weren't very nice to me, but you realize that what you were looking for all along, they were just one step on the journey that got you to the realization of whatever it is that you were looking for. Ultimately, you found it within yourself. And the best relationships are those that make us conscious of this process in a way that remains loving, that keeps us conscious of this process, but also uplifts the journey as well. And so we have this incredible energy now. And this energy is going to be speaking to us for an extended amount of time. It's just that on Tuesday, it perfects, it is exact. And I do think a lot of us may be feeling music very powerfully. I think music is going to be something, there may be a song or something that's released this week that reaches a whole lot of people, because it is Neptune and Piscean energy that's also associated with music. It's just so strongly magnified right now. Of course, though, I do want to mention with this as well is that, look, yes, this is a very big deal, but we've got a very big year ahead. We've got a big month ahead. We're going to have Venus in a triple conjunction with Neptune and Jupiter at the end of the month. We're going to have eclipses this year that are hand in hand with Uranus. We're going to have Uranus and Mars conjunct the North Node at the end of July. We have got a very big, massive astrological year that we are in the midst of now, but this is a profound and important moment as part of that journey ahead. Now, of course, this week we do also have a full moon. Now, normally, even that full moon I could really dive into. That's a very big deal in and of itself, but with a week like this, with one of the most important moments of the decade, astrologically speaking, well, the full moon might not always get that attention with a week like this anyways. Well, the full moon anyways is in the sign of Libra. It is going to be speaking in supreme harmony with Saturn, but it will also be speaking in a conversation of tension with Pluto. And this is very powerful energy, I have to say. This is energy in the sign of Libra. Libra is an energy of diplomacy, of partnership, of understanding our partnerships and what they're going to mean for us. It is Pluto. That is an energy that can sometimes speak to what isn't fair, what feels unfair in some way. When it feels like there are power struggles, power games, powers larger than us. But then we have a trine of Saturn, and that is energy of stability. That is energy of what is strong and solid and can last. And it's an energy of maturity as well. And so I see this energy a couple of different ways, at least for the collective. Of course, right now, there is a focus on diplomacy. We might see some of that and the limits of that. We may see focusing on partnerships and marriage and dynamics within marriage, marriage equality. It's very possible that some of these particular issues come into the collective consciousness as well. And it's also possible now that more of us individually are looking at our own one-on-one alliances, looking at where it is that they add stability in our life in a way that makes us stronger, but also where there may be power dynamics, sometimes very blunt, but sometimes more subtle, where that's working for us and where that isn't. Make no mistake, this is an emotional full moon as part of an emotional week. For a lot of us out there, we may find ourselves on a bit of a roller coaster now, where the energy of Libra speaks to the one-on-one interactions, seeing others as a mirror to us. We also are invited to recognize with that full moon that other people being mirrors doesn't mean that we take their opinion on as our own about who we are or our worth. It's about learning about ourselves as we interact with others. And as we look at their interactions and reactions, we're brought back to ourselves to understand ourselves more deeply. What's also fascinating about this energy, I mentioned this idea of power dynamics, and within any given alliance or partnership, there can be moments where one person feels or is more powerful than the other. The right, healthy relationships will sort of pass that back and forth. We'll consider both perspectives in some way. We'll understand that there are moments when one person may take the lead and the other may not, but also vice versa, without being threatened by the lead of another. That's part of maturity. To support, to inspire, and to be inspired without thinking that it's a race, that one is ahead of the other. And I think that this distinction or parts of these distinctions in our one-on-one alliances may come to the surface, especially under the light of that full moon. Now, finally, it is going to be this week. Well, look, it's a big astrological week. We've got Mercury connecting in a square with Pluto at the start of the week before changing signs on Monday, moving into the sign of Taurus. So there's some very passionate and intense words that can be exchanged at the very beginning of the week. So we are going to want to be mindful of the language we're using, how we're speaking to each other, the reactions either that are being evoked or provoked. But then ultimately that represents just a passing moment, because very quickly Mercury does change signs and moves into an earth sign, moves into the sign of Taurus, becomes a lot more grounded, and is able to pace communication. And when you pace communication, you're able to think more clearly about what you really want to say, to be more deliberate in what it is that you are expressing and what it is that you're communicating, to be more deliberate in how it is you're interpreting given communication that's being shared with you, however it might find you. So this can bring a lot of stability and healthy detachment where it comes to our interactions with others, where it comes to our own thoughts as well. Now, under the light of the conjunction, of Jupiter and Neptune that I spent most of this video talking about, I want to add the following day on Wednesday, the Sun will perfect a connection with Saturn, the Sun sextile Saturn. That is a lovely energy. I think that's going to end up being the saving grace for many signs out there, because the energy of Neptune and Jupiter can get very carried away, get very swept up in a moment, and can just go live in a dream, not even realizing that it's a dream. The energy of Jupiter and Neptune can feel like a miracle, but is that going to translate to our lived experience? Well, I think that the Sun sextile Saturn is going to help us to do just that, to embody and ground the energy of inspiration so that we make practical gains, so that it changes our lived experience in important ways as well. And it is going to be either very, very late in some parts of the Americas, but for most people out there, Friday is when Mars will change signs, leaving the sign of Aquarius and moving into the sign of Pisces, where there's already a party going on, right? We've already got Jupiter and Neptune there. We've got Venus there already in the sign of Pisces. Now here comes Mars, adding adrenaline into the mix. It is literally Piscean energy on steroids now. That is like the literal way that this energy can show up. So there's that much more heightened energy of dreaminess, but also the invitation of genuine communion, truly being known by others and feeling merged with others. That is going to be part of the motivation for all of us in at least one area of life as part of our individual journeys. We are looking for bliss. And with Mars here now, we very likely will be very creative and very courageous in the pursuit of it. What I love about this week for us, well, look, we are in the midst of very powerful times, without a doubt. This is a very important year, but we've had a couple of really important years as of late. I think things really accelerated with the conjunction of Saturn and Pluto. That was what really put that journey into high gear. But now here we are, and we become part of a promise. We become part of an understanding that whatever it was that has taken place in our lives over the course of the last 2 years, with the start of the pandemic, it just really intensified our spiritual journeys, our spiritual learning, needing to connect with our truth really intensified. And now here we are. We're invited to cultivate meaningful wisdom, the kind of wisdom that is seated in compassion, compassion for ourselves, compassion for others. The type of wisdom that, when cultivated, it really never leaves you. You can't go back. That's the thing. Once you've put in the time, once you've put in the work to move towards greater compassion, greater love, greater wisdom, and sometimes it is work because we're on a human journey after all. It may look on the surface that we have moments of regressing, but really, we are constant, moving onward. And with energy like this week, with great courage as well, towards our genuine healing and a genuine knowing that we deserve to be connected to each other, that we are connected to each other, and to be adamantly compassionate, especially towards ourselves in our own individual journey. Well, that just might heal the world. Well, thank you so much for watching. What do you love about this week? Let me know in the comments below. I love reading you guys, and to prove it to you, here are some of my most recent favorite comments. Thank you to everybody who likes, who comments, who subscribes, who shares, who thumbs up. All of it means so much. I thank you for it. And of course, if you want to know how all this wonderful stuff this week speaks to you in your sign, log on to NadiyaShahSuperstars.com, where you get expanded, exclusive video scopes for each and every sign, each and every week for as low as just $3 a month. With choose your membership rate. Now, higher tiers get you things like all access passes to Synchronicity University events, consultations with me, and so much more. All of this in the Superstar space. I look forward to meeting you there. Synchronicity University presents some of the most amazing classes that you're going to get this spring and summer in astrological education. Right now, choose your tuition rate is on as low as just $5 a class for these brilliant courses that are coming up ahead. I'm so proud of what I have been able to do and what my team has been helping me to do with Synchronicity University, and just bringing the most brilliant, the brightest, the most celebrated astrologers today to synchronicityuniversity.com. I'm going to actually start with me because choose your tuition rate for my classes is on for just a few days left as part of spring session 2022. Now, some of the classes I'm really looking forward to: Black Moon Lilith in Synastry. Yes, it's going to be probably the final class on Black Moon Lilith. I've already taught 4. This is going to be the 5th. We're looking at it specifically in the context of relationship astrology. We are going to have more classes on Vesta, classes on the midheaven, on the ascended, classes on the 12th house as well by popular demand by students. And so, yes, we'll be looking at the 12th house. We'll be looking at parent, child, synastry, and so much more. So I hope that you'll join me right now, and for just a few more days later this week. It will be the deadline, and you've got just a few more days to choose your tuition rate as low as just $5 a class. Classes with me this spring are starting up in 1 week at synchronicityuniversity.com. Link is in the description below. Synchronicity University presents the one, the only Melissa Canova. She is back, best-selling author Melissa Canova, and she's coming back with her second course with us based on her best-selling book, Kitchen Table Magic. And this is a Magic 101 class taught as only she can teach it. She is so filled with brightness, I tell you. She's got 7 planets in Sag. She's an incredible teacher. Students absolutely loved her. And so now here she is. And for as low as just $5 a class, with choose your tuition rate until the end of the month, you can take this class if you want to learn magical practices from the one and only Melissa Canova. Truly special and a fun learning event will be had by all. So I hope that you'll join us. She's so brilliant. She's so much fun. At synchronicityuniversity.com. Remember, choose your tuition rate is on right now for just a few more weeks at synchronicityuniversity.com. Link is in the description below. Synchronicity University presents the one and only Acyuta from NIGHTLIGHT Astrology. Boy, am I so happy to have him back, this time teaching a 5-week course. What? A 5-week course on the mystical roots of astrology. I think this is going to be so wonderful, so rewarding. He is, of course, a YouTube superstar, and he's coming to Synchronicity University, this time with a 5-week class where he'll be taking you through the signs and the houses and the planets and teaching you as only he can. And so I hope that you'll check that out, because choose your tuition rate is on right now for a limited time, as low as just $5 a class with Synchronicity University's very famous choose your tuition rate. And that's for a limited time only. So sign on and sign up for this very special learning event set to take place this June. This class will start at the end of May, so not far away at all. And you'll get a chance to learn from Acyuta at NIGHTLIGHT Astrology at Synchronicity University. Links are in the description below. Synchronicity University presents Marc Laurenson. He is a incredible astrologer, and he's going to be teaching your soul's mission in the birth chart. He is an expert teacher. He runs the very famous Sydney School of Astrology. I remember not too long ago, he taught a single class with Synchronicity University that students absolutely loved. And I remember even just interviewing him and what he was talking about, the way he helped me see my chart differently. It was absolutely phenomenal, absolutely remarkable. He truly does stand out in our field. So I hope that you will check that out as well. Now, that class was just announced, and you can sign up. Choose your tuition rate is on now. Marc's class is going to start in July, so not far away at all. But yes, choose your tuition rate is on now, as low as just $5 a class to learn from the one and only Marc Laurenson of the Sydney School of Astrology. Your soul's mission in the birth chart. What an incredible and rewarding topic to learn from the one and only, the truly brilliant Marc Laurenson. Synchronicityuniversity.com. Link is in the description below. And a couple of very quick announcements. I will have more information on this in the weeks ahead, but I have been tapped to speak at the NORWAC conference, which takes place in Seattle, Washington in the United States, the last week of May. And so I will be there the last week of May. I'm so excited. Live events are back, and I will have a very limited number of spots for live consultations set to take place at that time. And so I hope that you will join me for the conference. You get to meet other astrologers, you get to learn some astrology, or if you just want a consultation, reach out to me via my website, nadiyashah.com, and use the contact form there, and we can move forward and make that happen. So yes, consultations with me in Seattle, Washington are coming up the last week of May 2022, and I will be speaking there as part of the NORWAC conference as well. Now, the other event that I'm going to be at actually takes place in August. I will be in Denver, Colorado. I'm so excited about this. I passed through Denver once, just like changing planes. Other than that, haven't really had a chance to explore Denver, and I'm really looking forward to it. Seems like a beautiful city, but I'm going to be there for a week as part of this conference, and you can join me. You can get a consultation. You can book that consultation with me through my website using the contact form there. So yes, if you are in the Denver, Colorado area and would like to meet for an in-person consultation, reach out and we'll make that happen as well. And thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for watching. All the love that's in the air, the divine love that's in the air. I hope that you feel it. I hope that you enjoy it. I hope that it heals you as well. So thank you again for watching. It'll be a great week. Enjoy. Welcome to the exciting rebirth of Superstar, featuring choose your membership rate as low as just $3 a month. At Superstar, you get expanded, exclusive video scopes each and every week, unlimited access to special horoscopes, class passes for Synchronicity University, consultations with me, and so much more. All of this in the Superstar space. I look forward to meeting you there.